Hey, JCake here. I want to thank you for sharing part of your day with me. We're heading into day 5 of 30 teams in 30 days, and that means we're heading to Minnesota to talk about the Minnesota Twins, the champions of the AL Central. They finished with an 87-75 record and had a 119 positive run differential. That means they were the only team with a winning record and the only team with a positive run differential. There's no wonder they won the AL Central. So before we get to the offensive stats, I want to point out that only one player actually had the required number of plate appearances to qualify for any of the end of the year awards. That was Carlos Correa. The crazier part is, we all know how injury prone he was in Houston. Now, before you start to tell me, well, he's changed and he's doing better, you're right. In 2022, he played in 134 of the 162 games. And in 2022, he played in 136 of the 162 games. So he has absolutely proved me wrong these last 2 years. However, I'm still not a fan of him because he played in the Houston cheating Astros system. So, I digress. The point I want to make is, for these people we're going to talk about, they did not hit the required number of plate appearances to win any of the awards. But let's get to it. The leader for the Minnesota Twins in 2023 in runs, home runs, RBIs, total bases, slugging percentage, and on-base plus slugging, Max Kepler. The leader for hits, doubles, and games played, which is even crazier, is Carlos Correa. As you talked about before, he's also the only player with 502 plate appearances. Triples and stolen bases, Willie Castro. And Edouard Julien had the most walks on the team. And the craziest stat about that is he had 200 less at-bats than Carlos Correa. So, you're looking at someone with 300 at-bats. Again, just about 300 at-bats. And he had more walks than the player who had the most at-bats on the team. That's crazy. Something else that's pretty crazy about the offense in Minnesota, only 3 hitters had more than 100 hits. 12 people had 10 plus home runs, and 7 players had 100 plus strikeouts. That's crazy. The fact that they had such a positive run differential and so few hits, but so many home runs. Now, they didn't lead the league in home runs. But point being, if they hit the ball, it was likely going to be a home run, which is crazy because they don't have a ton of home run hitters on their team. But let's first talk about Correa. Again, not a fan of him. He did play in more games the last 2 years than I'm pretty sure he has played in his entire career. He is a mainstay at shortstop for the Minnesota Twins. That was a great move for him coming up from Houston, in my opinion. Again, still not a fan of him, but I think he has provided good leadership for the Minnesota Twins, and they're young too. I mean, the pitching staff has some decent players on there that guys can look up to with Sonny Gray, but hitting-wise, you were looking at Byron Buxton. That's the last person I would want to look up to and try to model my game after. We're going to talk about him in a second. But, Max Kepler is another guy who I think is young, but is a leader or veteran on that team. So the fact that Carlos Correa can be a positive role model, I really do like that. Somewhat versatile. He can play a little bit of second, but we're going to talk about Julien. Willie Castro can play third. He plays some outfield as well. So I really, really like the idea of Carlos Correa being a leader on that team, even if he has no morals, values, or ethics. Now we're going to get to Julien. I first saw him play in the World Baseball Classic back in 2023 when he was playing with Team Canada. I think he did really well. And so when I saw him playing for the Twins, I was like, I know that guy. I'm glad to see him doing well. He played 109 games for the Twins last year, and he hit 16 home runs, and he had 37 RBIs. Now, you might think of that and say, okay, no big deal. However, if you take the 37 RBIs minus the 16 home runs, that means he only produced 21 RBIs the rest of the season. 21 RBIs through 109 games. Not great. That could be a concern. However, he had a .273 batting average with runners in scoring position. He was up to bat 55 times and also drew 16 walks. So he does have plate discipline when he absolutely needs it. So I'm excited to see him play this upcoming year and actually get the full year under his belt. 109 games is a pretty good number, but obviously the 162 is where you want to see, your stars. And with him being young, and, you know, having that little bit of, I guess you could say, spring training with the World Baseball Classic, it got him ramped up. We are also going to talk about Max Kepler. A few years ago, he had a pretty decent year, and he was hitting, you know, with a decent, like, 260, 270 batting average, and then, like, 2 years ago, it plummeted. He could barely hit the broadside of the barn. He was hitting, like, 2 teens, 220s if lucky. However, 2023 brought a much higher batting average. He also had more hits, doubles, home runs, and RBIs than in 2022. He also almost doubled his strikeouts from 22 to 23. So that's not exactly the sexiest stat and not what you want to hear. However, there's got to be some give and take. And if he's hitting more home runs, he's getting players around the bases, he's producing, then, you know, you're going to have to take the good with the bad. You know, the batting average improved in 2023, but he did have 4 less walks. So almost doubled his strikeouts, but 4 less walks. Again, not the ratio you want to be inverted, but it is what it is. I personally think Kepler is going to be potentially third, most likely a fourth type of outfielder for you. Someone that you are going to be able to plug in when there's an off week, or excuse me, an off day for one of your main outfielders, or if he has a really good matchup. So Kepler is definitely someone I would like to look at and think would be an option for you. Much better than Byron Buxton, who we're going to talk about next, mainly because Buxton is always hurt. I'm personally not a fan of Buxton only because so much hype came in around him about how he was so fast. And let's be real, he has not produced the stolen bases like we want him to. And he's turned out to be a home run hitter. When he was coming through, I did not think he was going to be a home run hitter. I thought he was going to be a base stealer, going to be challenging Ricky Henderson for the record. You know, that's what they hyped him up to be. Byron Buxton has only played in 92 or more games 3 times in his 9-year career. That is like Mike Trout trend for the past like 3 or 4 years. That's not a good trend. That is not what you want to hear. People drafted him very early on expecting the stolen bases. As of recently, expecting the home runs, because who else does Minnesota have to put in the outfield? So they have to play him. However, he was hitting in the 100s over the course of the last 2 years, 3 years. So I've never drafted him. I've never wanted him. However, he has hit double-digit home runs the last few years. So I'm not saying go out on a limb and jump and get him. I'm not saying to have him as a source for home runs for you. But if he's on the waiver wire, if it's late in the draft, you need a 5th, 6th, 7th outfielder, or whatever it may be, he might be your guy. But I absolutely would not have him as my top outfielder or even in my top 3. So we're going to switch on over and talk about Royce Lewis. So he is likely going to be playing third. He can move over to the outfield positions and play as well, which might very well be the case if Byron Buxton can't get his head in the game. But in any case, he had a few ACL tears, some injury bug type issues. But I'll tell you one thing. There was a 58-game span in 2023 that he was healthy, coming off of the injury to start 2023, and then before he was shut down for the season at the end. 15 home runs, 52 RBIs, 20 walks, 55 strikeouts. He has a good eye at the plate, and he had, multiple grand slams. I'm seeing if I can find that. 16 RBIs off of 4 grand slams. The 36 others were in the other 54 games. That's definitely a good stat that you want to see. So he is producing. He is going to be someone in your lineup who can hit for power. Maybe with the ACL tears, he might not be tearing up the base paths, but he is going to get people around. He has a good eye at the plate. Like I said, we talked about 58 games. He had 20 walks, but he also had 55 strikeouts. A strikeout a game, not terrible. You don't want a golden sombrero like Giancarlo Stanton seems to rack up all the time, but Royce Lewis going to be a phenomenal player. He's going to be a mainstay at third. Again, depending on how things play out, he might have to play some outfield, but I foresee him being a great third baseman. Now let's move to the pitching, where, as I turn back over to look at my stats, we are going to see a few interesting numbers, because in quality starts in ERA, Sonny Gray, who is no longer with the team. Innings pitched and strikeouts, Pablo Lopez. I love Pablo Lopez. Wins, Joe Ryan and Pablo Lopez. We're going to talk about Joe Ryan in a little bit, because you talk about a disappointment and a drop-off. That's it. So, whip. 144 innings pitched, so that might be something to take into account. In 144 innings pitched, Bailey Ober led the team in WHIP. We'll talk about him in a little bit, but that is kind of the surprising stat. He is going to be a guy that I think you look at later in the draft because he's not a sexy name. He's not someone who's going to be flying off the board per se. So, of all the pitchers, there were only a few with 100 plus innings pitched. He had the lowest WHIP. So he had 12 quality starts. That was fourth on the team. So that's behind Joe Ryan, Pablo Lopez, and Sonny Gray. That's a pretty good crowd to be in. He also was on the fourth on the team with 146 strikeouts. So not only is he getting strikeouts, but he's not allowing base runners. So he's getting productive outs with strikeouts, but also the balls are not landing. So that could be luck, but that could also be the fact that he's a pretty decent pitcher. The only knock on him, he does give up home runs. So he doesn't allow a lot of hits, but when he does allow a hit, there's a decent chance it's going to be a home run. In 50 less innings pitched than Pablo Lopez, he only gave up 2 less home runs. Pablo pitched almost 200 innings. So that's, 50 plus innings, and you've given up the same amount of home runs almost. Again, not great, but a lot of the fact of, Bailey Ober's success really came from Joe Ryan being out and being hurt. Because if not, they would have stuck with Louis Varland or, some of the other guys they've had, and they had a few guys pitching. But the point is, Bailey took the opportunity, he ran with it, and he's probably and should be part of the rotation. So now we're going to talk about Mr. Joe Ryan. He had a very interesting 2023. So from the start of April into May and up to June 22nd, his ERA was 2.98. He had 100 strikeouts and 8 home runs in 93 innings. So from June 27th, when he got lit up by the Atlanta Braves, through July, August, and September, his ERA jumped to 4.51. Now, in that time frame from June 27th to September, he threw 68 innings, and his ERA was 6.61. He did still have 97 strikeouts, but he gave up 24 home runs. Wow. So, they said a groin injury may have been the reason for this, and he disclosed it after the season. So he was playing with this groin injury for part of the season. And so hopefully that is going to be gone after he has time to recover. And hopefully he's going to turn into the Joe Ryan he was the first part of last year and in the 2022 season. Someone else we want to see with continued success is Pablo Lopez. Last year, he hit career highs in innings pitched with 194 and also strikeouts with 234. That's going to be really tough to top, especially for a fourth year in a row strikeout-wise, because he has only pitched 102 innings 3 of his last 7 years. So injury concerns have hit a little bit, but with 194 innings pitched, hopefully that gives us a little leeway to say, okay, well, maybe he's overcome that hump. However, if there's anyone that wants to see him succeed, it's me, because he's on multiple fantasy teams. The main success for these pitchers is if their bullpen can finish the game out. One of the top guys in the league is Johan Duran, obviously led the team in saves, but they have phenomenal setup guy in Griffin Jax. He had 23 holds last year. The Twins only increased their bevy of bullpen arms by adding Justin Topa, who also had 23 holds last year for the Mariners, to that bullpen. So I am super excited for this Minnesota Twins offense and their pitching staff. That I'm going to have parts of them. Their bullpen looks great. I'm looking forward to seeing them repeat. I'm going to say they're going to repeat as champions. They're going to hold off the platinum level health insurance team. They don't have much to worry about from the White Sox. They don't have much to worry about from the Royals. The only other team that might give them a little trouble is the team we last talked about in the Tigers. I had to think about that for a second. But that's the only other team I think is going to give them a little bit of trouble. That's only if their offense can going and their young pitching arms can keep them in games. But in any case, I'm excited for this Twins team. I'm going to be having shares of them on all my fantasy teams. And talking about having shares of them, these additions are absolutely going to allow them to skyrocket in value for these individuals, but also this team in general. The first guy we're talking about is Carlos Santana. If you remember his time back in Cleveland, you know he had great plate discipline. I mean, he had like Victor Martinez-esque eye. He was getting so many walks. His batting average wasn't super high, but he was on base. He wasn't stealing the bases, but he was on base, coming around to score runs. Runners in scoring position, he was able to get the hits or get the walks to move them around the bases, get them home. So I think if he will be able to maintain that plate discipline, unfortunately, he did lose catcher eligibility many years ago. He'll be able to DH, and he'll probably be playing first at some point in time. So Carlos Santana, definitely a guy I want to look at. Next guy we're going to talk about is Anthony DeSclafani. I really liked him when he was with the Giants. I think he's going to be a good rotation piece once he recovers from Tommy John surgery. Next three guys we're going to talk about, all bullpen pieces. So you may not think much of them. However, in a holds and or saves league, this is what you're going to be looking for. This is what you want in your bullpen pieces. Talked briefly about Justin Topa. He had 23 holds for the Mariners last year. Came over with DeSclafani in that trade to send Jorge Polanco over there to Seattle. So, that bullpen going from Topa to Griffin Jax, then to Duran, be very scary. Stelmont was one of the better bullpen pieces in the Royals organization. However, he didn't get a whole lot of play because the team didn't do very well. So I think and hope and believe he's going to do well. He's probably going to be on a few teams that require holds this year. So him, Okert, Topa, Jax, all going to be guys that you can definitely look at to increase your strikeouts, decrease your whip, decrease your ERA, and pick up a few holds. Now the departures, unfortunately, we did talk about Jorge Polanco. Injury-riddled seasons, definitely not the best. However, he did put up decent years. That loss at second base and a little bit of shortstop might come back and hurt them. However, with Edward Julian playing second, I don't think they're going to miss much of a beat, especially if Julian stays healthy, unlike Polanco. Next guy we're talking about is Sonny Gray. As much as I really like him, he spent time in Cincinnati, spent time in New York, was terrible in New York, now has found a good bit of success with the Twins. He's off to the Cardinals. I don't believe they're going to have much trouble as long as Joe Ryan gets his groin healthy and Pablo Lopez continues to stay healthy and be able to increase his strikeouts and innings pitched, or at least be efficient with his innings pitched, regardless of whether they're 194 or not. I think they're going to be fine. Bailey Ober's waiting in the wings. If DeSclafani can come back the second half and perform like he did in San Francisco, I think the rotation's going to be fine. As long as they can get to the bullpen, they have this wrapped up. The biggest part of this team is going to be health. I mean, the biggest part of any team is health, but this team in particular, their success is going to hinge on health. My thoughts for the fantasy outlook for the Twins, you definitely want to pick up some of their players. The main guy you're going to want to look at, in my opinion, is going to be the pitching staff. Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober's going to be probably your fourth or fifth pitcher. Not going to hurt you in whip because he gets those productive outs, gets the balls, either ground balls or the fly balls, and they're not going to be flying out in Minnesota. He also gets some strikeouts. Does give up home runs, though. That's what you got to watch out for. But pitching rotation is probably going to be the best part, and the bullpen best parts of the Minnesota Twins. Do have some offense, obviously, like I talked about, but definitely look at their pitching. We are going to be moving to the AL West for the next division. We're going to start with the Oakland Athletics and, wherever they're going to be here in the next few years. But this is Jay Cake. I want to thank you for sharing part of your day with me.